Tom never catches Jerry. You know that. You've always known that. But here's the question nobody ever stops to ask. Why do we keep watching? There's no suspense. There's no mystery. The outcome is decided before the first frame plays. The cat loses. The mouse wins. Every single time across more than 80 years of cartoons, the result is the same. And yet somehow, it never gets old. That's not an accident. That's engineering. And the story of how two men at MGM built the most consistently successful animated franchise in history out of a premise with no surprises is far more interesting than anything Tom or Jerry ever did to each other on screen. Tom and Jerry debuted on February 10, 1940, in a cartoon called Puss Gets the Boot. It was produced by William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, two animators working at MGM's cartoon studio who had been given a modest assignment with no particular expectation of greatness attached to it. What they delivered over the following 17 years and 114 original theatrical shorts was something that won 7 Academy Awards, redefined the possibilities of visual comedy, and created a template for animated conflict that the entire entertainment industry has been borrowing from ever since. But here's what most people don't know about Tom and Jerry. The show almost didn't get a second episode. The characters had different names for most of their first year. The directors had a working relationship that was, by multiple accounts, one of the most productive creative partnerships in Hollywood history, and also one of the most quietly competitive. And the violence that made parents nervous and critics dismissive was, in the hands of Hanna and Barbera, a precise and deliberate artistic tool that they understood far better than their detractors ever gave them credit for. Today, we're counting down 11 facts about Tom and Jerry that most fans, even lifelong ones, never knew. Some of these will change how you watch the cartoons. One of them might change how you think about creative partnership altogether. Let's get into it. 11. The characters were originally named Jasper and Jinx. When William Hanna and Joseph Barbera first developed the cat and mouse concept that would become Tom and Jerry, the characters had no names at all in the traditional sense. Internally, the cat was referred to as Jasper throughout the production of the first cartoon, and the mouse went by Jinx. These were working titles rather than settled identities, placeholder names used on model sheets and in production documents while the characters were still being developed. The first cartoon, Puss Gets the Boot, was released to theaters in February 1940 with the cat referred to simply as Jasper in its title card. The mouse had no name at all in that first outing. He was an unnamed adversary, a plot device rather than a character with an established identity. MGM screened the cartoon, noted the audience response, and decided to commission more. But before the second cartoon went into production, there was the matter of what to call these two animals on a more permanent basis. The studio held a naming contest among its employees. An animator named John Carr submitted the names Tom and Jerry, a reference to an old British slang term for a couple of boisterous young men about town, drawn from a popular 19th century book called Life in London by Pierce Egan. The names won the contest. Carr reportedly received $50 for his contribution. What's interesting about this detail is how much the names shaped the characters in retrospect. Tom and Jerry are names with a specific cultural resonance. They suggest a particular kind of relationship, an energetic push and pull between two figures who are fundamentally defined by their opposition. Jasper and Jinx suggest something more static, more fable-like, characters in a story rather than forces in a dynamic. Whether the names actually changed anything about how Hanna and Barbera approached the characters is impossible to say definitively, but the Tom and Jerry that emerged from those early cartoons had an energy that Jasper and Jinx somehow doesn't quite capture. $50. That's what the identity of one of the most recognized animated franchises in history cost at the point of its naming. 10. The first cartoon was almost the last. When Puss Gets the Boot was released in 1940, it performed well in theaters. Audiences laughed. Exhibitors reported positive responses. By any ordinary measure, it was a successful short film that justified a follow-up. But the decision about whether to continue the series was not made by audience response alone. It was made by the MGM studio system, which operated according to its own institutional logic and its own ideas about what was worth pursuing. MGM's cartoon studio at the time was run by producer Fred Quimby, a man whose relationship with the creative process was, by most accounts from the people who worked under him, primarily administrative. Quimby was not a creative executive in the mold of Walt Disney. He was a manager, and his instincts ran toward efficiency and institutional caution rather than creative risk. When Hanna-Barbera proposed continuing the Cat and Mouse series after the success of Puss Gets the Boot, Quimby was reportedly skeptical. His concern was straightforward. The cat and mouse premise was not new. Other studios had done cat and mouse cartoons. What was the differentiating factor that justified building a whole series around it? What saved Tom and Jerry, according to accounts from people close to the production, was an external intervention. Exhibitors, the theater owners and bookers who actually showed MGM's short subjects to audiences, wrote to the studio requesting more of the cat and mouse cartoons specifically. This kind of direct market feedback coming from the people who controlled access to screens rather than from internal studio opinion, carried a different weight with Quimby. If theater owners were asking for it, the financial logic was clear enough to override his reservations. The series continued. Within 3 years, it was the most decorated animated franchise in Hollywood, collecting Academy Awards at a rate that made everyone who had hesitated over the second episode look, in retrospect, like they had nearly made one of the more consequential mistakes in animation history. Tom and Jerry survived its first year, not because its creator's vision was recognized immediately, but because the market sent a message that the institution eventually couldn't ignore. That is a less romantic story than the one about creative genius being immediately rewarded. It is also, probably, a more honest one. 9. Hanna-Barbera won 7 Academy Awards and almost never got credit. Between 1943 and 1953, Tom and Jerry won 7 Academy Awards for Best Animated Short Film. 7. In a single decade. No other animated series in history has matched that record, and it was achieved by 2 directors working on a consistent weekly production schedule with the budgetary and institutional pressures that came with being part of a large studio system rather than an independent creative operation. But here is the detail that most people don't know about those awards. When Tom and Jerry won its first Oscar in 1943 for a cartoon called Yankee Doodle Mouse, the award was presented to Fred Quimby, the producer, the man who had nearly prevented the series from continuing past its first entry. His name was on the statuette. Hanna-Barbera's names were not. This was not an anomaly or an oversight. It was the standard practice of the Hollywood studio system at that time. Producers received Academy Awards for the work of the directors and artists who actually made the films, because the producer was the studio's official representative, and the award was understood as an institutional honor rather than a personal creative recognition. The people in the room doing the work received their paychecks. The person managing the budget received the Oscar. Hanna-Barbera continued making the cartoons. They continued winning. Quimby continued accepting the awards. And while there is no documented record of either Hanna or Barbera expressing bitterness about this arrangement in the years it was happening, they were studio employees who understood the system they were operating in. The irony is difficult to ignore. 7 of the most celebrated short films in the history of American animation were made by 2 men whose names were not on the awards those films won. When the MGM Cartoon Studio finally closed in 1957, and Hanna-Barbera went on to found their own production company, they put their own names on everything they made. Given the preceding 17 years, that decision requires no explanation. 8. The violence was a deliberate artistic choice, not a creative failure. Tom and Jerry has been criticized for its violence since approximately the moment it first appeared in theaters. Parents complained. Critics wrote disapprovingly. Various advocacy groups across various decades raised concerns about the impact of watching a cat get hit with a frying pan approximately 7,000 times across the course of a television childhood. The debate about animated violence and its effects on children is one that Tom and Jerry sat at the center of for most of its existence. What that debate consistently missed was the degree to which the violence in Tom and Jerry was not incidental to the comedy, but was, in fact, the comedy, constructed with a precision and a logic that rewarded close attention and that operated according to rules as consistent and deliberate as anything Chuck Jones was doing with his Roadrunner cartoons at Warner Brothers. Hanna-Barbera understood something fundamental about physical comedy that goes back to the origins of the form. From commedia dell'arte through silent film, through the great slapstick tradition. Physical pain in comedy is funny under very specific conditions. It must be clearly consequence-free. It must be disproportionate to the cause in a specific and satisfying way. And it must happen to a character whose dignity is being punctured rather than whose humanity is being violated. The moment the audience believes the pain is real, the comedy dies. Tom and Jerry managed those conditions with extraordinary consistency. Tom's suffering is always spectacular, always recoverable, and always the direct result of his own aggression or his own overconfidence. He is never a victim in any meaningful sense. He is an antagonist receiving what the narrative logic of his own behavior has earned him. The mouse is not cruel. He is reactive and resourceful. And the violence between them, for all its apparent brutality, operates within a moral framework as clear and consistent as any fairy tale. William Hanna, in interviews later in his life, pushed back firmly against the characterization of Tom and Jerry as mindlessly violent. He made the point that the cartoons had not produced a generation of children who hit each other with frying pans, and that perhaps the critics who worried about this had underestimated both the intelligence of children and the clarity of the cartoon's internal logic. He was, on the available evidence, correct. 7. The MGM Orchestra gave the cartoons a musical standard nobody expected. One of the things that genuinely separates the classic Tom and Jerry theatrical shorts from virtually any other animation of the period, including arguably the Looney Tunes output at Warner Brothers, is the quality of the music. The scores for Tom and Jerry were performed by the full MGM Studio Orchestra, one of the finest musical organizations in Hollywood, under the direction of Scott Bradley. Scott Bradley was not a composer who treated cartoon scoring as a lesser assignment. He was a formally trained musician who saw the Tom and Jerry shorts as an opportunity to work at the absolute frontier of the relationship between music and image, to solve problems of synchronization and emotional amplification that had no established solutions and required genuine compositional invention. Bradley's scores drew from classical music, jazz, and contemporary concert music with a sophistication that was entirely out of proportion to what the format was assumed to require. He incorporated techniques from composers like Bela Bartok and Arnold Schoenberg, composers associated with the academic avant-garde rather than with Saturday afternoon cartoons, not as decoration but as functional tools for achieving specific comedic and emotional effects. He reportedly corresponded with Schoenberg about his use of 12-tone techniques in cartoon scoring, and Schoenberg, by most accounts, found the application genuinely interesting, rather than presumptuous. The result of having that level of musical intelligence applied to Tom and Jerry is audible in every cartoon if you know to listen for it. The music doesn't just accompany the action, it anticipates it, comments on it, occasionally contradicts it in ways that add comedic layers the image alone doesn't contain. A chase sequence becomes a different kind of funny when the orchestra is playing something that sounds like it belongs in a concert hall. The gap between the grandeur of the music and the absurdity of the action is itself a joke, and it's a joke that lands precisely because Bradley was skilled enough to make the grandeur genuine. Tom and Jerry won its Academy Awards for the complete package, the animation, the comedy, the direction. But the music was, in every one of those winning cartoons, doing more work than most viewers ever consciously registered. That invisibility is, in its own way, the highest compliment you can pay to a film score. If the real history behind the cartoons you grew up with is your kind of content, go ahead and subscribe. We do this every week, and it only gets deeper from here. Now, back to Tom and Jerry. 6. The two directors worked in near silence, and it made everything better. William Hanna and Joseph Barbera worked together for 17 years at MGM. They produced over 100 theatrical short films. They won 7 Academy Awards. And by multiple accounts from people who observed their working relationship, they spent remarkably little of their collaborative time in direct conversation with each other. This was not the result of animosity or professional friction. By all available accounts, Hanna and Barbera genuinely respected each other and maintained a warm working relationship throughout their time at MGM and beyond. The near silence was a division of labor so completely established that it required very little verbal negotiation. Each man knew precisely what the other was going to do, and each trusted the other to do it without supervision or consultation. The division was clean and consistent. Barbera handled the story and the gags. He was the idea man, the comedian, the one who sat at a desk generating the concepts and comic situations that would drive each cartoon. Hanna handled the timing and the direction. He was the technician and the editor, the one who understood exactly how many frames a joke needed to breathe before the punchline landed, and exactly what the character needed to be doing in the moment before the audience laughed. What made this division so effective was that both men were genuinely excellent at their respective roles and genuinely uninterested in doing the other person's job. There was no territorial overlap, no competition for creative control, no argument about whose vision should dominate. Barbera made the jokes. Hanna made the jokes work. The system produced cartoons at a pace and a quality level that the studio's output schedule demanded, and it did so with a consistency that is almost without parallel in the history of commercial animation. Most creative partnerships fail because both people want to do the same thing and one of them has to lose. Hanna and Barbera succeeded because they wanted to do different things that happened to be complementary, and nobody had to lose anything. That sounds simple. In practice, in a creative industry, it is extraordinarily rare. 5. A single cartoon almost got the entire studio shut down. In 1944, MGM released a Tom and Jerry cartoon called Mouse Trouble. It won the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film that year and was considered one of the finest entries in the series. But behind the scenes, in the same general period, a different cartoon had caused a crisis inside the studio that came closer to ending Tom and Jerry than any external competition or commercial failure ever had. The cartoon in question involved content that Fred Quimby considered unprofessional and inappropriate. The specific details vary across accounts, and the cartoon itself is not definitively identified in the historical record, but the incident reportedly involved a scene or series of scenes that Quimby felt crossed a line in terms of the content the studio was willing to put its name to. He delivered what was described by witnesses as a significant dressing down to Hanna and Barbera, made clear that the studio's standards had been violated, and threatened consequences that would have materially affected the series' future. What makes this incident worth noting is not the specific content of the disputed cartoon, but what it reveals about the working environment in which Hanna and Barbera were producing their work. The MGM cartoon studio was not a creative sanctuary. It was an institutional production environment with real constraints, real oversight, and real consequences for stepping outside the lines that management had drawn. Every Academy Award. The Series 1 was produced within that framework, under those pressures, by two directors who had to simultaneously satisfy their own creative standards and the institutional requirements of a studio system that was not always sympathetic to either. The fact that the cartoons are as good as they are, that they contain the timing, the musical sophistication, the visual inventiveness that they contain, while being produced under those conditions, is something that deserves more recognition than it typically receives. Creative excellence produced under constraint is not less excellent for the constraint. It is often, in fact, more impressive. The limitations forced Hanna and Barbera to be precise in ways that unlimited creative freedom might never have demanded. 4. Tom and Jerry were rebooted 4 times, each time by a different creative team. When MGM closed its cartoon studio in 1957, the original Tom and Jerry series ended. 114 theatrical shorts, produced over 17 years, all the Academy Awards, all the cultural impact. And then the studio closed the unit because the economics of theatrical short film production no longer made sense in the television age. But Tom and Jerry was too valuable a property to simply retire, and what followed was a series of attempts to revive the franchise under different creative leadership, each one revealing, by contrast, exactly what the original had been. The first revival came in 1961 when Gene Deitch, a Czech-based American director, produced 13 new Tom and Jerry shorts for theatrical release. The Deitch cartoons are among the most discussed entries in the franchise's history, not for their quality, which most analysts rate as significantly below the Hanna-Barbera originals, but for their strangeness. Produced in Prague with limited resources and a cultural distance from the American context that shaped the original, the Deitch cartoons have a flat, slightly surreal quality that makes them feel like Tom and Jerry viewed through a distorting lens. They are fascinating documents of what happens when the form is retained, but the specific intelligence that animated it is absent. The second revival brought Chuck Jones, yes, the Chuck Jones of Looney Tunes fame, to the franchise in 1963. The Jones cartoons are technically accomplished and intermittently very funny, but they feel like Chuck Jones cartoons that happen to feature Tom and Jerry rather than Tom and Jerry cartoons. The characters move with Jones's specific visual grammar rather than Hanna-Barbera's, and the difference, for anyone who has watched enough of both, is immediately perceptible. Even genius, applied to someone else's creation, produces something different from what that creation originally was. Subsequent revivals came in the 1970s and 1990s and beyond, each with varying degrees of success, and each demonstrating, in their own way, the same fundamental truth. The original, Tom and Jerry shorts were the product of a specific creative partnership, a specific institutional context, a specific musical intelligence, and a specific historical moment, and no subsequent attempt to replicate them has fully accounted for all four variables simultaneously. The franchise has survived every revival. The original work remains, in the judgment of most serious analysts, unreplicated. 3. The show addressed loneliness in ways nobody talked about. Here is something that most analysis of Tom and Jerry skips over entirely because it requires watching the cartoons with a degree of attention that the slapstick surface doesn't immediately invite. Tom and Jerry are, in a very real sense, each other's only companions. Look at the world those cartoons construct. Tom lives in a house as a pet, dependent, domesticated, existing at the pleasure of an owner whose face is almost never shown. His social world consists of occasional encounters with other cats or animals, but his primary relationship, the relationship that structures his entire existence, is with Jerry. Jerry lives in the walls of that same house, hidden, marginal, surviving by wit and resourcefulness in a domestic space that was not built for him. His social world is similarly limited, and yet they keep coming back to each other. The chases could theoretically end. Tom could stop pursuing. Jerry could find a hole in a different wall. The conflict is, in some fundamental sense, chosen, a structure that both characters perpetuate because the alternative, which is to simply coexist in mutual indifference, is somehow worse than the chaos of perpetual conflict. Several of the most celebrated individual Tom and Jerry cartoons lean directly into this dynamic. There are entries in the series where Tom and Jerry are forced by external circumstances to cooperate, a common enemy, a shared danger, a situation that makes their usual hostility temporarily impossible. And in those moments, the cartoons reveal something unexpectedly moving. These two animals, who spend their screen lives trying to defeat each other, are also genuinely more comfortable in each other's presence than in anyone else's. The truce always ends. The chase always resumes. But the moments of genuine cooperation, of something that looks almost like friendship, are not played for irony. They are played straight, and they land with a warmth that the surrounding violence makes more poignant rather than less. William Hanna once said that the key to Tom and Jerry was that Tom didn't really want to catch Jerry. He wanted the chase. That observation, which sounds like a simple comic principle, is actually a fairly precise description of a specific kind of human relationship, the one where the pursuit is the point, where catching what you're chasing would end something you aren't ready to end. The cartoons never articulate this explicitly. They didn't need to. It's in every frame. 2. Tom and Jerry changed how animated violence was timed forever. This one requires a small amount of technical context, but stay with it, because the payoff is worth it. Before Tom and Jerry, animated physical comedy operated according to a relatively simple principle. The gag happened, and then the audience reacted. The timing was functional. Set up the situation, deliver the impact, cut to the result. The comedy lived in the concept rather than in the construction. What Hanna-Barbera, and specifically Hanna, whose primary responsibility was the timing of the cartoons, developed over their 17 years of Tom and Jerry, was a fundamentally different relationship between anticipation, impact, and aftermath. They discovered, through thousands of hours of practical experimentation, that the comedy in a physical gag is almost never in the impact itself. It's in the moment before the impact, the anticipation, the suspension between cause and consequence, and in the moment after, when the character processes what has just happened to them. Hannah reportedly spent enormous amounts of time on what animators call the take, the character's reaction in the instant before or after something happens to them. Tom's face in the moment before the anvil lands. Tom's expression in the 2 seconds after the piano has fallen, but before he has fully registered the piano. These micro moments, which could be extended or compressed by single frames to completely change the comic effect, were where Hannah believed the real work of animation comedy happened. This insight, that timing is not just about pace, but about the precise distribution of attention across the full arc of a gag, influenced virtually every animator who came after. Chuck Jones has cited Hannah's timing instincts as something he studied carefully. The directors who came up through the ranks of MGM and Hanna-Barbera Productions carried these principles into their subsequent work. The specific rhythms of animated comedy that we now take completely for granted, that feel like natural laws of the medium, were worked out frame by frame in a studio in Culver City by a man whose name was not on any of the Academy Awards those cartoons won. That is the particular invisibility of technical genius, the way a thing done perfectly disappears into the experience of watching it, leaving no trace of the intelligence that produced it. Tom and Jerry looks effortless. It is the opposite of effortless, and the distance between those two things is where Hannah spent his career. 1. Tom and Jerry didn't just entertain generations. It crossed every border. Humanity has pulled back from everything: the gags, the music, the Academy Awards, the production history, the creative partnership, all of it, and consider the single most remarkable fact about Tom and Jerry. Not as an animated franchise, but as a piece of human communication. Tom and Jerry contains almost no dialogue. The characters don't speak, don't explain themselves, don't narrate their intentions or their feelings in words. The entire emotional content of every cartoon is communicated through movement, timing, music, and the purely visual language of expression and physical action. There is no language barrier to Tom and Jerry, because Tom and Jerry has no language. It speaks in something more fundamental than words. The result of this is something genuinely extraordinary in the history of popular culture. Tom and Jerry is one of the most universally recognized entertainment properties on Earth, watched with equal comprehension and equal delight in countries with nothing else in common. A child in rural India, and a child in suburban Ohio, and a child in urban Brazil all laugh at the same moment in the same cartoon, not because they share a cultural reference or a linguistic understanding, but because a cat getting hit with a frying pan registers as funny in the same way across every human nervous system that has ever encountered it. That universality was not planned. Hanna-Barbera were making cartoons for American movie audiences in the 1940s. They were not thinking about global distribution or cross-cultural communication. They were solving immediate problems. How to make this gag funnier, how to make this chase more exciting, how to make 7 minutes of a cat and a mouse feel fresh when you've already made 50 cartoons about the same cat and the same mouse. But in solving those immediate problems through visual means rather than verbal ones, they accidentally created something that transcended every boundary that human beings have ever used to divide themselves from each other. Language, geography, culture, history, none of it matters when Tom steps on the rake. The rake comes up. Tom's face registers what is about to happen 1 frame before it happens. And every human being who has ever watched that moment laughs at the same time. That is not a small thing. That is, in its own modest and completely unassuming way, one of the more remarkable demonstrations of shared humanity that popular culture has ever produced. 2 men in a studio in California making cartoons because it was their job, discovered by accident that there are things human beings find funny for reasons that have nothing to do with who those human beings are or where they come from. Tom still hasn't caught Jerry. He probably never will. And somehow, across every language and every culture and every generation that has ever watched them, that is still the funniest thing in the world. Tom and Jerry turns 85 years old in 2025, and the original cartoons, the Hanna-Barbera theatrical shorts from the 1940s and 1950s, the ones with Scott Bradley's orchestra and William Hanna's timing and Joseph Barbera's gags, those cartoons are still being watched. Not out of nostalgia, though nostalgia is part of it. They're being watched because they work, because the comedy is constructed with enough precision and enough underlying intelligence that it has not aged in any way that diminishes it. Tom and Jerry is still funny for the same reason it was always funny, because the craft underneath it is real. Hanna and Barbera made something that time simply cannot touch. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens by caring completely, even when nobody is watching. What's your favorite memory?